So in this relatively short segment, we're going to look at the relational algebra concepts related to column and table renaming. Our SQL examples thus far have introduced two forms of renaming. Renaming of columns in the select clause, like this, and renaming of entire tables, especially to generate virtual copies of those tables. So, for instance, where we're trying to join two line item rows like that. Now, it's not initially obvious, but we can and should view such renaming as a relational algebra operator. Renaming of attributes and tables is essential to expressing certain relational algebra operations, in particular to express table duplication and to reduce intertable name duplication. So, the relational operator row, that's a Greek row for rename, with a subscript that is the rename spec, we'll get to that in a bit, indicates a renaming operation. It takes a single relation as an argument and produces a new relation identical to that argument but with different names for the relation and possibly its attributes. The subscript takes the form new relation name and then in parentheses new attribute names with the parenthesized part optional. For instance, if we have a relation line item, the schema that looks like that, then this expression, row li1 on line item, produces a new relation with the same attributes and tuples as line item but named li1. And then this expression, row li1 and in parentheses rid num and prod on line item, that produces a new relation with the same tuples but named li1 and with its attributes named rid num and prod instead of receipt id, line num, and product id. Neither expression changes the meaning or the value of the tuples and attributes, just their name. And very importantly, the row operator conceptually produces a new relation that is a copy of its argument with changed names. It does not change the relation passed to it. Line item remains unchanged by each of the two expressions above. Also, if a row operator renames attributes, it must list them all, even if many get the same name as before. Attribute renaming is all or nothing, even if many attributes are not changed. So, for instance, row li1 rid line item is not acceptable, but row li1 rid line num product id on line item would be allowed. Now, not surprisingly, I'm going to ask you to translate some relational algebra expressions using row to their SQL equivalent and vice versa. Any instance of row implies a use of SQL's renaming syntax, and any SQL rename means you're going to have to use a row in the relational algebra. So question 1. Translate this relational algebra expression into SQL. And by the way, a related question, how many joins does it perform on line item? It's a trick question. Think carefully. So expanding the answer a bit here. We translate it into select star from receipt join line item li on receipt id equals id, and there's that rename of li there, and then join line item li2, and there's the rename of line item as li2 on id equals li2.receipt id, right there. And the answer to the trick question is it performs no joins on line item, only on two tables li1 and li2 that are renamed copies of line item, as we just said earlier. And the second point is the most important in a way. While it's true that the actual implementation of this SQL will not really copy line item to create tables li1 and li2, it will nonetheless behave as if it had. Conceptually, renaming is duplication with new names, regardless of its actual implementation. Okay, so now try it the other way. Translate this into relational algebra. Note you'll need a row operator for renaming of the selected columns, but SQL doesn't offer a table name for the final result. You need a table name to satisfy the row operator, so just use result as a dummy in that case. Expanding out the answer there a bit. should come up with something like, get it to a size that's readable. Probably easiest to break this down by working from the inside out. Okay? First note that the join in this SQL is the same as that from question 1. So we'll start with the relational algebra for that join in the innermost parentheses, right there. Okay? And it includes the renaming that it does on the line item relations. Now, the where clause on that join needs a select, and there it is, select operation. And then we project the result choosing just the 3 attributes that were given in the select statement. Now, that doesn't rename them, it just selects them. So to get them renamed, we're going to have a final outermost row operation renaming the selected columns, and then that dummy result name, as we mentioned, for the unnamed final result, which doesn't have a table name.